Enter madman, stage left. The audience rises and holds their breath. They let the vampires into their house, pretend they don't see when the teeth come out. Put a band-aid on their throat. No one wants to rock the boat, and no one wants to talk about it. You're not supposed to talk about it. The curtain rises and the players come out. Webs of light spinning from their mouths. Start looking, listen for a little while. Attention to the men behind the curtain. Just look away when you see the blood spurting down to a steady drip. I promise to leave you a little bit. I'll be back for another drink tomorrow. I love the taste of your terror and your sorrow bathing in your blood. It's never enough. Upon the face of all mankind, our numbers up and the dead woman sign. Go along to get along, hypnotized by the siren song. The flames are empty and the crypts are cracking open. The horde's upon you and you stand there frozen, waiting for the word. Stand in line and wait. Don't follow the strings to find out who is pulling. Just drink your poison, keep on laughing and drooling, eating your own flesh. The master always knows what's best. Worldwide genocide. The overlords are hungry parasites. They point the finger and the eagles fly. Raining fire, children die. Starving plague, paralyzed. While the bodies rot and covered in fire. But no one wants to talk about it. Strings, no more bowing to the master. I tried to run, but they only came faster. Now I stand my ground. I ain't backing down. Silver bullets in my pistol in my holster. My will is strengthened and my confidence is bolstered. Don't test my resolve. Don't test my resolve.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Iron Mountain Hour. It is Sunday, January the 28th, 2024. My name is Cliff. I'm joined by Dustin, and we are coming to you live here from the Iron Mountain in Carter County, Tennessee. So glad to have you with us. Please go in the description of the video. Follow us in Rumble, on X, everywhere else you can there, so we can get the show out to everybody that we can. And please be sure and click on the description of the video to get the link to go to the radio encryption petition for Southwest Virginia for the Virginia State Police. That's brought to us by our friends over at Scanner Food. They're really pushing for that for everybody to be able to be aware of what's going on in the public spaces around us and where our public services are going. So be sure and click on that and sign that petition. If you haven't already, follow Scanner Food on Twitter, or X as it's called now, and on Facebook, although they do get banned a lot on, or they get their page blocked a lot on Facebook, so be sure and follow them on Twitter too. Scanner Food, if you're out there, post some more on Twitter, man. We'd love to see you more. Black Ducks, glad to have you with us, man. Been to Lost Cove plenty of times, and yes, it's an awesome trip and very beautiful, and we're going to go look at some pictures The photos we're going to look at tonight are actually from 2009. The last time I hiked up there was probably 2014 or 15.
It's pretty much all been stripped out. So.
Yeah, so the pictures we're going to look at tonight. This is from from an old school website back in '09, and we're going to look at some of those. It's better than the photos that I got. So we got some really good photos when we went. I don't know where they are right now, but these definitely show you a better look at it than what we got by the time we got around there and took photos of it.
And we have a double shameless plug.
That's right.
We're both wearing.
Dustin and I unintentionally wore the same shirt tonight.
No, it's intentional. Don't let it lie to you. We're casting for a remake of Twins. Yeah.
Yep. And if anybody's still out there hadn't got their Corned Beef and the Pillbillies albums and shirts, we do still have those available here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's with the artwork by my lovely wife B here. That's Pissy the Possum. And check this out, man. She really did some cool stuff on the inside of that. And you got your full page there. And if you look at the moonshine bottle, let's see if I can do this right.
If it'll focus it.
Yeah. It's got the map of Carter County on it.
County.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Thanks, B, for doing that. That was a pretty cool one. But you can email us at the ironmountainhour@gmail.com. We can get one of those out to you. We do have T-shirts available too. And stickers, all that kind of stuff.
T-shirt that we're wearing.
Yeah, and we have Iron Mountain Hour
extra,
t-shirts.
I can give you the one I currently have.
And it does have on the back too. It says "Hammer down and give it hell." Corned Beef and the Pillbillies. What's up, Dalton? Glad to have you with us, brother. Hey, my dog Stock here is really wanting attention under the table for some reason. He's
10. Quit doing that.
So yeah, man. Glad to have y'all with us. Where the main topic tonight is 90s nostalgia, and if we've noticed over the last, really, it's been since like the early 2010s, 80s nostalgia's been in full bloom, been full kick. I mean, we've seen everything from, the Stranger Things phenomenon was really kind of the culmination, I would say, of that, of your 80s nostalgia.
I guess like the largest big chunk of it, because there's been stuff, like back whenever, I guess you would. Because there was always that I love the 80s stuff.
Well, and a lot of the music started taking on a lot of the influences from the 80s. We started hearing kind of like The Weeknd became really popular, and that was really reminiscent of an 80s kind of synthy pop sound. You kind of had synth pop become big again, and I really get into shit like Gunship and Time Cop and stuff like that.
I'm for the new retro.
Yeah, sure. It's been great too. I really enjoy Gunship. They're one of my favorite groups. But one of those things that's been missing, like we've been in that full kick for like 13 years now, 14 years, and we've not really seen the 90s nostalgia take up like we did. Because like even in the early 2000s, we saw a lot of 70s stuff, and then kind of when we got into the 2010s, it's like, well, let's look back at the 80s. So it's kind of like 30 years back. We look back and kind of relive these things. Even in the 90s, we saw with grunge, the 60s kind of came back a little bit too. A lot of bell bottoms, and then we made them our own with things like Jinkos, which was, our 90s kids version of bell bottoms.
Had small pockets of returns.
Yeah, I've seen those come back a little bit.
Smaller pockets than they actually had. But,
yeah. And skateboarding, was a really popular thing in the early 90s, and rollerblading too, if you remember.
Rollerblading fell off hard. Skateboarding still. Actually,
skateboarding
it's not
kind of
mainstream as it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it's still.
You had guys like Tony Hawk making, names for skateboarders. They were up in but what's crazy?
In the limelight, yes. But I was like, you still had hell, it's like look at like Rodney Mullins, like he's still doing it, and he's been doing it since like the 80s.
Well, if you look at somebody like the way, talking about extreme sports, look at how far they progressed. If you look at skateboarders now, and like BMX bikes and things like this, I remember seeing Travis Pastrana being the first guy to do like a backflip on a dirt bike. And now, like, if you can't do 2 backflips and, land it perfectly while you're running a race, not just like showing off and doing a trick, then you're not shit in motocross.
And now it's like, if you can't do a freaking front flip on the bike, it's like you ain't nothing.
Yeah, and it used to be that was the extreme. So that stuff's come a long way. And if you look at stuff like the Olympics, and that was one of the things I was talking with B about, is the Olympics like used to be a big thing. Like it was like if the Olympics were on, pretty much everywhere you go, that's what people were watching. That's what people were talking about, even if you weren't really a sports fan. And same thing with like some things like the World Series and the Super Bowl. It was kind of these cultural events that we all still kind of got together for, and like even even outside of like.
I never gave two shits about who was playing.
I didn't either,
but it's like it was like, hey,
we
it's free.
Still did
it's
it.
free food.
Yeah.
It's free food, and I can trash talk both sides because I don't care.
Yeah. And those were cultural moments that well, that was it was easy to kind of unite people around because we still had a common culture. Even though the '80s, one of the really cool things about the '80s is different kinds. It was almost like the entertainment and production companies, the music companies, television, movies, they didn't really know what was going to take off and be the next big thing. So they just kind of had more resources than ever, and they had bigger audiences than ever. They had more media to reach people with. So they just kind of threw everything out there to see what sticks. And you kind of had, that was when you kind of had like all these different subgenres of music start to form really in the 80s. You kind of saw, like your metal genres, like your black metal and death metal and, speed metal. And then you had like different kinds of rap and different kinds of R&B like starting to form and kind of have their own distinctive sounds. And in the 90s, kind of they grew even more, and you started seeing some of those things become mainstream, like Metallica became mainstream. Slowly but surely through the 90s, Metallica became more and more likely that you would go somewhere. I remember being a kid in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was really drawn to that stuff, and I saw like the Metallica shirts with the puss head art on them, and like I always wanted that stuff. And it was kind of that was kind of almost like an outlaw culture at the time. But then as you went on further into the 90s, it became more mainstream with things like Marilyn Manson, becoming prominent, and
the
White Zombie.
whole new metal movement was basically like when it really became like popular.
Yeah, things like Limp Bizkit and Godsmack and things like this in the late 90s becoming big.
And when Korn finally got into their part of the limelight.
Yeah, and so then you had rap kind of taking off with guys like, and this again, these are names we really don't hear a lot of now, but they were huge back then. Like guys like Bone Thugs and Harmony and 3-6 Mafia. These guys were huge. They had kind of this big rap war going on, and then there was the East Coast West Coast thing. You had Big E versus Tupac versus Wu-Tang versus and it seems silly now, but it was actually a big deal to people. There were people dying and stuff at the time over it, and like West Side is the side that I claim and all this stuff, and it's almost like there are some parts of it that we'd probably do well to forget, but other parts of it that I'm surprised haven't been seized on by these people who market nostalgia.
But if you look at it, okay, the 90s is probably, I would say as a whole, the best for the music, because it's like, okay, once the Cold War ended, whereas like places like Russia, what have they stayed at? They've stayed at like 90s styles, like your 90s style tech death and like 90s rap. Like old school, like gangster rap sound. It's like that's what like.
What's really
because
funny?
They couldn't have any of that during the Cold War era. So
what's
it's like
really funny in Russia is the '90s truck culture. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
The guys driving like dualies and wearing cowboy hats and tight jeans and stuff like that. That's pretty funny. I saw this, and this was a good indicator for it. I felt like. Let me go to this.
But Russian death and black metal is like top notch. If you.
I don't know that I really know of any Russian black metal.
Altar.
I've listened to. I didn't know they were Russian.
Yeah.
This was something that popped up in my Twitter feed today, and I thought it was pretty fun.
There's a ton more, but now my brain's just going.
I know you remember this song, and I know you remember this outfit.
Mama is depressed, barely makes a sound. Daddy's got a girlfriend in another town. Bob Dylan sings like a rolling stone.
And it's true.
Brother's wearing beads, Daddy smokes a lot of dope. Mama is depressed, barely makes a sound. Daddy's got a girlfriend in another town. Bob Dylan.
Country music was it was like you basically had your country, and then you had your kind of rock and pop, and then you had your rap, and then you had kind of your hard rock and metal, and everybody kind of got together on, like, if you were in the country, kind of you were probably into most of the country that was out, unless you were in like Hazel Atkins and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you might not like Tim McGraw, but there that was a big part of the culture. Wrestling, WWE,
Wrestling.
yep,
It's
NASCAR.
still real to me.
I mean, all these things that were like, and maybe it was just because I was a kid and like these were the only things that these were the things that the people around me were into. But it seemed like these were a lot bigger cultural events, and like as a society, we had a lot more vested in them than we do now. And with football and stuff, it was that they reclassified themselves recently as a sports entertainment organization, which is the same classification that WWE has. So it makes you wonder, when how much of this football is real. I mean, how long has it been? I feel like that they've decided for a long time who the teams are going to be, and like, especially since sports gambling has taken off in pretty much every state now. I feel like a lot of these things are decided already. They probably were for a long time, to a degree, but I feel like just with legalized sports betting, it's really puts a lot of incentive to the people in those organizations to get in there and have a say with what's going on. But those big sports events were huge. I can remember the World Series in '93, I think it was. We had a player from Elizabeth, and Kirby Puckett was on the Minnesota Twins, and then we had the Braves that were real close to us here were in the World Series against one another, and both those teams had been the worst teams in their respective leagues the year before that, so they did like a worst to first thing, and that was a huge thing for everybody to watch that World Series. But now it's like, it's not that I really even cared about sports at the time, but I don't even know who was in the World Series. I don't even know who was in the Super Bowl last year, and I don't really care, and this wasn't that I really cared then, but everybody around me cared, so I couldn't help but know. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, because we've kind of broken the culture up into a bunch of different things, and that allows for the culture to grow in different directions. But at the same time, as the United States as a country is kind of falling apart, there's like not a lot of homogeneity. And you kind of need some degree of that to hold a nation state together. So, as a culture of America, how does it really benefit us? Does it benefit us more to have diverse culture with a bunch of different branches that kind of are connected at the root, but we ultimately each form part of our own tree, or was it better when we kind of were part of a whole tree of culture that had different branches coming out of it that we were all still connected to? Let's we'll look at some of these. I'll hear your thoughts on it in the chat as we go through. It's still real to me, damn it. This is Black Duck. That's right. Yeah, Hansel Atkins was the man. Yes, he was. No more hot dogs. I'm tired of eating those hot dogs. But let's look at go back to the early 90s, and we'll start at 1990. Look at some of the top movies of the 90s. And in the 80s, a lot of these movies that have been classified as cult classics were films that were not particularly popular when they came out, but later people realized, hey, these are really awesome, and they built up a following. And like, I think of the movie like Wizards. It was not really popular at the time, but there were enough people that really loved it that they kept it alive, until I heard about it in like the 2000s. Movies like the trauma films, those were really unpopular at the time. They probably barely, they were really low budget, but they probably still barely made any money, but they, made enough to keep them coming. And there was a small group of people that loved those, and now you can still see those if you go on like Tubi or Netflix. It's going to be
Trauma. There's an entire app with every film on it.
Well,
they have their own like streaming app.
Yeah, and you're going to find a dedicated following to that. But those were not popular at the time. But when we look back at the 90s, a lot of the films that we see called cult classics were like blockbusters at the time, huge ones, and like some of them, the only ones that I really see in the main zeitgeist these days are things like Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump, um, Interview with the Vampire, maybe. Saving Private Ryan. These are kind of ones that you still look at that still hit the mainstream. But other things like 1990, one of the top movies was Misery. Like you never really hear anybody talk about Misery anymore. Goodfellas.
I was gonna say I do. I've actually mentioned it in a conversation
Yeah,
like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I would say we're a little bit different than the mainstream zeitgeist.
Yeah, we're a bit more eccentricity.
But the top movies were like the Hunt from Red October.
No, that's good.
That's a good one. Goodfellas, I think, is still out there. People still talk about Goodfellas.
Mm-hmm.
Handmaid's Tale. I hear that one in discussion. I heard it a lot when like Trump was elected president, and they said that they did the Women's March everywhere. They even remade the Handmaid's Tale. Somehow they missed one of the key parts of that original film and the novel from Margaret Atwood, which is the idea that we're going to change. We're no longer going to be a society that gives you the freedom to do things. We're going to be a society that offers you the freedom from things, freedom from oppression, the freedom from being offended, the freedom from being, and basically they use this to take over the society. And in that film, they created basically a male-dominated world where females were subservient, and they did it under the guise of giving you the freedom from things. And you see, like that's one of the things that a lot of the political movements now are offering you is we weren't going to offer you the freedom from, and we're not going to. We don't want you. We're going to be free from the threat of mass killers or whatever. So we're going to strip you of your rights. It's in order to free you from that danger. But yeah, there was. I mean, Steven Seagal was huge at the time, which I think we can all agree that was probably a better thing. Arnold was pretty much he was like at his peak right there. We had Terminator coming out in '91, Terminator 2. Kindergarten Cop was in 1990, and yeah, that one still gets around. And Terminator, like Arnold, is like one of the only things that really survived from the '90s, like Lethal Weapon. We don't really see much discussion of those. People talk about Die Hard, but not Die Hard 2. In this, and it's basically just the argument of whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. And I've got a question for you. I watched one today, and this is what really made me think about it. I watched the movie Money Train with Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson. And is that a Christmas movie? It takes place at Christmas. And has shows a bunch of Christmas. He's talking about, let me get you. I need to borrow some money so I can buy you a Christmas present. And that reminded me of White Man Can't Jump. And that was another thing that reminded me of. There were a lot of movies at the time where you had like a black guy and a white guy who were teaming up and getting past whatever cultural differences that they may have. And I think that this may even be one of the reasons that a lot of these movies are like people don't want to reach out to these, because a lot of the culture in the 90s was we were realizing the ideas of the people like Martin Luther King, where they talked about basically, I have a dream that one day our black and white children will kind of do everything together. And like we still recognize like, okay, like there was like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where it was like, okay, it's weird, but black people are entering a lot of these spaces that have traditionally been, like really wealthy people. That was traditionally only really the white people were in that space. So let's look at these differences of these cultures meeting one another. And so one of the things that I see about it is, yes, we acknowledge that we're different cultures, and we acknowledge that we might not always agree on things from a
and even like in those films, if at the very beginning, even if they weren't like too keen on each other, they learned the differences of what makes them both special, and learn to be like, hey, we're cool. This, everything's cool.
And then here's a movie, Memphis Belle. I don't know if you remember that. That was had the black air crew that was in there, and it was a lot. A big part of it was, and you remember the black guy always died first in like the 80s and 90s, and especially in the horror films. But he was always the most relatable character. So it was like, man, I don't know why I got to be out here looking around in the dark for this damn monster by myself, you know.
Yeah.
And like next thing you know, he's dead, and everybody's like, yeah, why does he have to be out looking for the monster as well? But it got to be where it all culminated, I would say, in the America of the early 2000s, the America that actually eventually elected Barack Obama. This was probably the only time a majority white country ever elected a black head of state. You can fact check me on that. I don't know if it's, but I would venture to guess that's probably the only time that's ever happened. So it was like all this stuff in the movies that we saw in the 90s. It wasn't to the point of like, oh well, these guys are one color is superior from the other. It's like we're all different, but we all work together for a common goal because we all can agree that there are certain things that are right, and this is what we should all work towards. And that's one of the reasons, again, I think that a lot of these movies and television shows are not really in the zeitgeist that much anymore. We go back to '91. We're looking at stuff. Let's see what we got here. 91, I remember My Girl was a cultural force.
K2.
K2, what was that? The mountain movie? Yeah, about climbing.
Yeah, I think it was K2 up on Everest.
Yeah.
Area.
Let's see, Necessary Roughness. That was, and remember we had those football that we had. Whether it was Necessary Roughness or Major League or Hot Shots, it was all basically the same movie, just with a different sport as the setting. You know, like the underdogs. Drop Dead Fred was amazing, yes. Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. Bill and Ted, I remember those. So let's look at, but again, when's the last time you saw any of these referenced or mentioned?
I mean, besides myself, I sometimes will quote stuff from Drop Dead Fred.
It's pretty rare.
But yeah, no one ever. There's like 3 people that ever gotten it. But
yeah, we have more Steven Seagal in '92. We have Under Siege there. Remember when we thought? I mean, Steven Seagal was like the baddest ass dude. You know, time has gone on, and we've seen like some real badasses. So not that, I mean, Steven Seagal honestly probably for the time probably was, you know, a pretty tough dude. He did know some Aikido, which very few people knew back in the day. But with, you know, UFC and mixed martial arts really becoming popular, it's kind of hard to look up to Steven Seagal anymore. Although I haven't seen his Lawman show. So.
I have no clue.
Can you imagine getting arrested by Steven Seagal or Shaquille O'Neal or who was the other guy that's like there's another famous person
Like
that
see Shaq walk out and you're just like, I'm gonna go fit in this tiny hole. You can't get me now.
That's all like Hulk Hogan a few days ago. He rescued some girl, like pulled her out. She flipped her car in traffic, and he popped her airbag and pulled her out of there. That reminded me of a story.
Save your life, brother.
That reminded me of a story Bob Saget told about how he and what's the guy's name that plays Uncle Jesse? John Stamos. About how they would meet for lunch, you know, even after Full House for like years, they would get together and have lunch. And he said one day they were like coming out from having lunch, and there was a car accident, and some girl's airbag went off, and they like went up to the door. Hey, are you okay? And she looks out, and there's Uncle Danny Tanner and Uncle Jesse at the window. Can you imagine the surreal experience? like, did I hit my head really, really hard?
Did I hit my head really hard?
Man, in the so we get on to '92. What do we have in '92? We've got Batman Returns. I remember that was a pretty good Batman movie. We had Danny DeVito as the Penguin. We had A River Runs Through It with Brad Pitt. A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Still, I guess like my whole life I've only been into like the sci-fi, horror, and thriller stuff. Because half these top movies, I'm like, these weren't top movies to me.
Last of the Mohicans. Now, remember Last of the Mohicans was a pretty big one.
That's a good movie too.
Reservoir Dogs came out in '92. I guess you could say that's a that's kind of a cult classic. But like again, even these like if you'll find these in the cult classic, even some of these biggest biggest films from the 90s in the cult classic sections of Netflix and Tubi and all that. 93, we had Son-in-Law, Pauly Shore. That's something we don't really think about
Wasting
anymore.
the juice,
Remember all
buddy.
those?
Yep.
Falling Down
Falling
with
Down.
Michael Douglas. That one really was kind of a cult classic. That one's gotten popular in the years after. You had Alive, which was the story of the plane crash and the guys having to eat each other to survive. That was a cultural force, man. That was like everybody knew that story. And that was about the time little baby Jessica fell in the well. Do you all remember that? I think I was probably 9 or 10 when it happened. It might have been the late. It might have been the late 80s. I don't remember, but
I don't remember.
that little girl fell in the well. That was a huge thing. The whole country was all over that. The Sandlot. That's definitely one that still makes its way around. Cool Runnings, Dazed and Confused. I think our whole generation got subtly indoctrinated by Dazed and Confused. I've mentioned it before, where the teacher says, "Now talking about the 4th of July brouhaha, and remember that the whole reason for the 4th of July was because some rich white men didn't want to pay their taxes." And I tell you, I think our whole generation took that to heart in a lot of ways. 94, we had Legends of the Fall. Natural Born Killers was a huge cultural movement. We had and a lot of people I don't think really understood that movie for what it was. The whole thing was to point a finger at media and sensationalism and Hollywood and the cultural zeitgeist and how we're driving us to this. They're driving society crazy intentionally as part of a feedback loop to like, well, let's pump this thing up. Let's create celebrities out of these fucking crazy people who are doing these crazy things.
Why so many of these people end up doing these atrocious things, because it gets them that attention, that 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people at it just looked at they saw Mickey and Mallory, Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis's characters as more of like heroes rather than because the film was shot in such a way that they are arguably the protagonists. But you're not really supposed to identify with them and think that they are right. Like they're the victims of everything going on around them with the mass media frenzy. Using them. Of course they have their victims too, but they're being victimized by the media machine.
Why 93? Why didn't it have Jurassic Park up there as one of the top?
Oh, I don't know. Was Jurassic Park 93? I thought it was 92, 94. But Jurassic Park was definitely
The Crow.
Definitely huge. Yeah, The Crow.
Junior.
Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger getting pregnant?
Maybe it was in one of those where it didn't scroll over.
Yeah, it
but
might have
still,
been.
I figured it would have been,
That should be one of the top
top-notch,
ones, yeah, because
it's still, to this date, that's one of the best made films.
and you don't really hear a lot about things like Speed, Passenger 57, Drop Zone, Cliffhanger. These things are really not. They're not around much they were huge at the time. Yeah, and Ace Ventura even is like Jim Carrey's still huge, but Casino from 95, Seven.
Oh, that 7 was awesome.
Now you remember Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, that with the Wesley Snipes and Patrick Swayze as drag queens.
No, I don't remember that.
Had Showgirls, remember that? Elizabeth Berkley from Saved by the Bell. That was her first film after that, I think. NC-17 rating. It was huge. Everybody was talking about Showgirls, or at least the kids our age. You had Dolores Claiborne. That was a little bit different one from Stephen King. Sean Connery was huge. You had who was the other one that we just saw just a minute ago? Oh yeah, Wesley Snipes. The Net with Sandra Bullock. That movie really doesn't hold up. It's really not watchable now. It's funny to watch though and see them talking about like very basic ideas of the internet and like describing it for an audience that doesn't really know what the internet is. And the whole point of that was this was a new medium that we're going to look at and kind of exploit the novelty in order to make a film about it. Twister was around then too. It was a huge one.
Yeah.
I don't see it. Fargo. Fear with Marky Mark. Remember me and my friends liked that one.
Fargo.
Yeah, Fargo was pretty big, and The Craft, that was the one I was thinking of. Yeah, that was pretty big among our kids. Independence Day, that was a huge one.
Oh yeah, that one was.
And like
Mars Attacks.
Mars Attacks. Yeah, now that one you could call a cult classic. But it's more popular now, I'd say, than something like Independence Day, which was probably the biggest film of ever at
Yeah.
the time. And Mars Attacks, now you probably have more people watching it than Independence Day. Let's see. I guess what's it called? The Dude had to come out around there. The Big Lebowski had to be sometime around this. Was it? Or
All
that might
these
have been
other
later in
films,
the
they're
90s.
probably some of the later ones, and we didn't scroll down.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Cause I'm like From Dusk Till Dawn.
From Dusk Till Dawn, Escape from L.A., John Carpenter coming back for that was the first one he had done in a while. He had the For the Mouth of Madness, I think in '94. You're in the Mouth of Madness. 97, where we got Contact. That was a pretty good one. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. I don't really remember much about Donnie Brasco. I know that Al Pacino and shit. The Postman.
Fifth Element.
I thought that was going to be a lot cooler than it ended up being, but it was still pretty
It
cool.
was still cool.
Yeah.
But Fifth Element was definitely.
Fifth Element definitely up there. Jackie Brown, that was a Quentin Tarantino one that I didn't think got enough credit. Devil's Advocate was huge. Event Horizon.
Event Horizon is one of my top 5 films ever.
So we had a lot of good stuff in '97. But again, Good Will Hunting, you really don't see a lot of these mentioned anymore. Which one was that?
Batman and Robin.
Batman and Robin. I went and seen Batman Forever in I think it was '95.
Yeah.
And
Time to Freeze. Cube. That is a film that it's weird. It's like I hated it because it bothered me so much as a kid.
yeah,
but
it's uncomfortable.
I have watched it so many times.
Yep.
It's one of those films that was just like it made me so uncomfortable, and it pissed me off sometimes. But every time it was on TV, I would watch it.
It was kind of a precursor to stuff like Saw.
Yeah.
You know, where you wake up and you don't know where you are, and you're with a group of people, and you've got a puzzle to figure out, or you're going to die. The conspiracy theory, Con Air, Con Air was a pretty big one.
Okay. No shit. Someone sent me a meme that was basically like the serial killer in Con Air.
Yeah.
Is actually one of the dudes in Big Lebowski.
Steve Buscemi, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like, if you look at it, you're like, he's the same as
Oh,
like when he gets
Donnie
bowling.
is the
Donnie, yeah,
thing.
Donnie. And it's like, because he has like a different person's bowling shirt on, so he's still a serial killer, but, dude and them are the only people that know him.
All right. Well, that's an interesting theory.
It was like, when it played, I don't have it right now, but it's like my friend sent me that, and I was just like, huh, it kind of makes sense.
Well, one of my favorite theories like that is the Home Alone Saw. And that is that Kevin McAllister from Home Alone actually grew up to become Jigsaw. And especially in the first movie, you can see a lot of similarities with Kevin McAllister. They say he was traumatized by being left at home and being, the burglars, and it kind of broke him, and he got off on, the whole thing with the furnace. There's also like a mask in Saw that looks exactly like the furnace, and a lot of key scenes from Home Alone were recreated in the first Saw. And so people have said that I forget the creator of Saw's name, but that he was actually intentionally doing this to say this is what happened to Kevin when he grew up. And when you see Jigsaw, he actually is like blonde-headed, pale, and would be about the same age as Kevin. He's a little bit older in the later one where the last Saw that came out where you see him, but I think at least for the first Saw, that one really works. So definitely go out and watch. There's a quick video on YouTube, a series of them that you can see that show you the similarities. We go on to '97. We got. I missed '97.
No, we were in '97.
Oh, we did '97 already. Okay, so '98 we go on. We got. Not a lot. SLC Punk, that was kind of a
American History X.
American History X is the big one.
Fallen, and that's another. If you've never seen that,
I've never seen Fallen.
Film.
With Denzel.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, that's a good movie.
No, I don't remember that one. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That's
Dark City.
Dark City is a real good one. I remember seeing the preview for that, and like it had been it was a while after that before I actually got to watch it.
Yeah.
It was pretty creepy. I think it was based on, I think it was a French film. The Faculty, that was a pretty cool one at the time.
Faculty is great.
Armageddon, that was a major cultural force, but now
Faculty CGI doesn't really hold up, but the story is still fantastic.
Is that a Wes Craven film? I feel like it probably was. Let's look it up. It just has that 90s Wes Craven vibe. Remember he was making Scream at the time, and no, Robert Rodriguez. Okay, I would not have guessed that. Well, that's okay though. Robert Rodriguez had some good films at the time. I enjoyed that one. I remember I saw that in the theater. Let's see what else we had. 99, Girl Interrupted, Dick, Virgin Suicide, Boys Don't Cry, Talented Mr. Ripley. We're seeing a little bit of a swing there to more.
Mr. Ripley actually wasn't bad.
Cruel Intentions, based on Dangerous Liaisons, another French story. These are a lot of ones that are kind of, these are more hitting you in the more emotional dramas. And then you had The Green Mile was a really big one at the time. Analyze This was a good one with Billy Crystal and Robert De Niro. Fight Club was a huge cultural movement. Eyes Wide Shut, Boondock Saints, yeah.
Eyes Wide Shut, yes.
These were all pretty big at the time. But again, you barely hear any of these. American Beauty with Kevin Spacey, you know, that weird thing about him perving on the young girl. You know, I doubt that movie would get made today. A lot of these movies probably wouldn't get made today.
Big Daddy.
But yeah, Big Daddy was a good one. Bicentennial Man. That's kind of when we got started. We had the AI film right after that with Haley Joel Osment. We kind of got into these. That's when we're starting to get into this. Oh well, robots are going to be here soon. What are we going to do when they start thinking for themselves? Of course, we'd already had Terminator and things like this. Several movies that kind of talked about it, but this was where we kind of, well, how's it going to affect our everyday life when robots are part of our everyday life? And
well, hell, it's like if you just look back at sci-fi from the 50s, I mean, kind of plays into that well.
Yeah. And look at some of these. Let's look at some of the charts from 1990s. They're the music charts. We got everything from Sinead O'Connor and Depeche Mode, Vogue. This is kind of like 1990, Wind of Change from Scorpions, about, you know, the fall of the Berlin Wall. You had Alice in Chains. This is pretty eclectic top 10 list.
That's pretty dang good. Pretty much all the way through.
And 1991, remember these? Smells Like Teen Spirit and Losing My Religion. Those were the jams. Under the Bridge. These were like, you couldn't go anywhere without hearing these songs. I remember they were everywhere. And then on to 92, you had Radiohead, Dre and Snoop. You had Tears in Heaven, Eric Clapton. That was a big one. And everybody knew the story behind that song, too. Yep. Baby Got Back was everywhere. It's still everywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody Hurts is now a meme. You know, it's like pretty much with somebody having a bad day, you can put Everybody Hurts behind it.
Yeah.
Four Non Blondes, The Cure.
Friday I'm in Love, that still plays on music systems everywhere.
Mm-hmm. We got Luther, we got Nirvana, Gin and Juice, Mr. Jones. God, that was everywhere. Are You Gonna Go My Way, Lenny Kravitz. What an awful song that somehow became very popular. Yeah, man. We got remember Waterfalls from TLC, Sabotage, Black Hole Sun. All these, like, this is the soundtrack to my childhood. Like all these last 4 years right here. Those were when I was really getting into music and stuff. Gangsta's Paradise, Wonderwall, Oasis. You had Tupac on California Love. Yeah, me and my friends were jamming all these songs. Bullet with Butterfly Wings. Yeah, Smashing Pumpkins. Mariah Carey was still everywhere. Blackstreet, No Diggity. Yep. R. Kelly, I Believe I Can Fly. Remember that song?
Yeah.
You couldn't go anywhere without hearing that.
Full song.
And that kind of reminds me of the Titanic song.
Prodigy was on the top. Wow.
I think the what was that one? I Believe I Can Fly and the Titanic song, My Heart Will Go On. I believe those were probably the most songs that I heard over and over again. I Believe I Can Fly was on Space Jam.
Yeah.
It was huge.
What I Got from Sublime.
Yep,
Yeah.
Sublime. That was right before he died, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Shortly after that. Bittersweet Symphony. That was in everything.
Mm-hmm.
Song number 2 from Blur.
And, you know, it's still weird when I say it's like, okay, whenever that song plays, I was like, you know, that's the guy that does Gorillas, and people are like, huh? And I was like, listen to his voice. That's 2D.
No,
And then they listen to it and they're like, you're right.
Who is now?
Blur 2, he's the guy that does Gorillas.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I can tell it now. I can tell it now.
Yeah.
Hypnotized from Biggie. That was huge. Time of Your Life from Green Day.
I hate that song.
That was huge, though.
Yeah,
It was in movies, television shows, everywhere you went. Mo Money, Mo Problems, and I'll Be Missing You from Puff Daddy. Then you had the Goo Goo Dolls were real big around 98, 99.
Doo-wop, that thing.
Yeah.
Hell, that was good.
The Corn started getting big.
Britney Spears, yeah.
Oh, Brandy and Monica doing the Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson song, The Boy Is Mine. Intergalactic from the Beastie Boys. Do you believe? That's hard to believe that was 98.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then in 99, here comes Eminem busting onto the scene. I can remember listening to that album. Like, I bought that album. I bought it from Blockbuster Video when it came out because I'd seen that video a couple times, and I bought the CD and just like took it back to the bedroom and was like listening to it with the case when several friends, and we were just
it's weird. A lot
all
of
reading this stuff.
It's like the rap from that era I still listen to somewhat regularly, but
Yeah.
a lot of the rest of it I'm like, no, I don't listen to any of this anymore.
Yeah, same here.
It's like the Californication album from Chili Peppers was good.
Yeah, I definitely listened to that one a lot.
But,
And then the 2020s, I really don't like know most of this. I know I'm older, and I'm
let's see.
but like even like a lot of these, like the top ones, like Bad Bunny and stuff. Like, okay, something like Lady Gaga. A lot of people still know Lady Gaga. But if you go into like a bar and you play one of these songs, most of the people aren't going to sing along, like because all these cultures are so divided. But if you go into a bar and like in like the 90s and even still you can play songs from the 90s that people know or the 80s, and everybody will sing along to it because it was, you just don't. It's hard to recreate that full. Nationwide a song catching on like it used to.
I have like these top things like right here on the screen. I was like, I like that Ariana Grande song.
I don't know that
and
one.
The Billie Eilish song because I like her.
Billie Eilish is actually good. My daughter listens to her. I've never really listened to her, but I was surprised. I wasn't expecting it to be good, but it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's like I like all of her stuff.
Let's see. Yeah, but most of this I don't know. Doja Cat recently, she put out that song with her. The promo it was Demons, and it was the Friends couch, and it was her in the Friends couch dressed as a demon, and it said Demons, and then like a day after that, Matthew Perry died, and that got me thinking about the Friends. That was a huge phenomenon. You had Seinfeld was very similar, and then Friends kind of picked up where Seinfeld left off, whereas Seinfeld was. It was kind of more obvious that these are a bunch of like narcissistic, selfish, kind of the worst people, but they're still really likable and personable. Where Friends kind of took that almost to another level of like okay, these people are, yes, they're good to one another, but like they really don't care about what happens around them. But it was less obvious than with Seinfeld. But a lot of people really related to a lot of the different characters on Friends. And, you had like your basically your 5 or 6 different stereotypes that, so everybody could relate to somebody. And it kind of started the coffee shop phenomenon, because that wasn't really a thing until people wanted to be like Friends hanging out at Central Perk. And there you go. Then you had Starbucks popping up everywhere. Let's look at some 90s memes here.
Way better for a coffee shop though.
Yeah, it really is.
I know that shampoo is horrible.
Yeah, let's look at some 90s memes here.
Even though I fell into that craze as a kid and liked it because the bottle was like a fish shape.
Yeah, no tears my ass. Shit was like acid.
Yeah, that stuff was horrible.
Taking selfies 90s style. That's right.
That camera, like I've seen people mod those cameras. It's actually you can make some pretty cool stuff with it.
Yeah. Pizza. The jingle should have also warned you that it would burn the inside of your mouth. Well, I could have taken a better way to make that into a meme, but yeah, that's true. But you remember the fervor? The pizza in the morning, pizza in the evening, pizza at supper. Sounded like Liza Minnelli was singing it or something.
Yeah.
Which I meant to say on our most hated Christmas
Oh, God,
Christmas
those
songs,
things.
the Liza Minnelli, because we need a little Christmas. It makes me feel like I want to have a full nervous breakdown, but I didn't
I
mention
feel like
that.
I have a little stroke.
Yeah. What was the point of these other than run over fingers? Well, they make a lot better crawlers now. They're creepers.
God, I remember those in school though. This, my thing,
Remember the
my digits.
remember the baby bunnies or beanie
Beanie
babies?
Babies, yeah. I
Uh,
still have some of those from a kid.
yeah,
I don't
some.
think I don't think I was like I was looking. I was like, do I have any of them that are worth even like a little bit of money that I can hack off? But
Well,
I don't.
that's something that only people were around the '90s can remember. The CDs, the BMG music clubs, the
Mhm.
Columbia House.
Yeah,
Did you ever do one of those? I did. I did them a couple times,
did
and
like one or two.
I did it in the early to mid '90s, and then I did it in the early 2000s, and um, in the early mid '90s. Whenever my mom let me do it, we just never paid for it, and we got a bunch of free CDs. They sent us letters saying like, "Hey, you haven't paid for the CDs," and we were like, just ignored them for years. But I did actually do it in the early 2000s, and
Was that
I
like all the
started a pretty
ones
good
with
CD collection.
the AOL and like internet discs?
Yeah,
It's kind of funny, like whenever you tell kids now that Netflix used to come in the mail, and they were like, "Oh, what happens? Did the internet come in the mail?" It's like, yeah, actually,
yeah,
that's how you got your access disc to get the
yep.
to get your
And people really would collect those things, and you had like 15 minutes free of AOL, so people would like put all these different discs in their CD drive, so they would have like a total hour or 2 hour to browse the internet. And here we go, perfectly taped Chumbawamba off the radio, and the DJ talks for the last 5 seconds. You remember making mixtapes?
hmm
And I don't think I ever mixtaped Chumbawamba, but that
I
was
never
it.
had that good of a setup. I had like a mini tape player
Yeah.
that could actually, I could do it off music videos off the TV, and I had a certain setting that I could point it at it, and it actually had okay fidelity back on it.
Well, we've got this meme. We were talking about Scream earlier. Wants to call a boy from class, afraid his parents will pick up the phone. Yeah, remember you used to have to call and
Scary
like,
movie.
yeah, I can remember calling girls and stuff, and their parents were like, yeah, who's this boy calling you? But yeah, the old landline phone, and you'd have the long ass cord that you try to get as far away from the rest of your family so they couldn't embarrass you while you were trying to talk to a girl. Let's see. That we still relate to. Here's texting in the
Probably
'90s.
less mold though,
Yeah,
or
probably.
maybe more. Who knows?
We just probably didn't know about then.
Yeah,
Remember these texts? Remember playing paper
paper
football?
football.
Do
Yeah,
kids still play paper football?
I don't know. I could still see paper football being fun, but like playing quarters, no, no.
When you saw this, you knew the movie was going to be lit. What's that
I
from?
have no freaking clue.
I don't know that. I don't
Unless
remember
it's
that.
some Disney bullshit. I don't know.
You had not experienced true fear until a poster falls down the middle of the night. Yeah, I remember those posters too. I had Jordan and the Dream Team. Actually, I didn't really like Jordan. I had the Dream Team,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't like Jordan so much because it was easy to root for Jordan because he was the best. So it's like, yeah, the best guy's gonna win all the time.
Exactly what you said 5 seconds
Yeah, there
ago.
you go. Phone cord doesn't stretch far enough. Most of us didn't even have cordless phones in the '90s. Some people did. The rich
It's
kids.
weird.
That's the way we
We
thought.
actually had a cordless phone, even though its range was still not much more than what the cord would.
And of course, Saved by the Bell was huge. I often said, when kind of pointing out how the cultural media actually affects us. Uh, um, like, do you think we really affected Saved by the Bell more? Do you think Saved by the Bell was based on more real kids, or do you think more kids based how they, modeled their personalities and uh, on things that they saw in things like Saved by the Bell? Um, I feel like that probably influenced us more than we influenced it.
I didn't really watch that as a kid, but I was still. I don't know. That's
I do. You remember all that, don't
yeah.
you?
I was getting ready to say all that.
Lori Beth Denberg. She was funny. You only ever see her now in like, hell, I don't know the last time I saw her. The last time I can think about seeing her is in Dodgeball, where she, Justin Long throws her up in the air and she smothers him. But she was funny.
Yeah.
Yes. Remember on the Tiny Toon Adventures, the audience is now deaf.
Yes.
Yeah, pinball. Don't see much pinball anymore. Discman. Doesn't skip when driving a car. That never happened. They always still skipped. Inflatable furniture. Dunkaroos.
Dunkaroos.
That's from the Sandlot, right? Or is that from...
Ah,
Is that from Stand By Me or the Sandlot? That's from Sandlot.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a kid jumps in, pretends to
Actually, like
drown.
it's drowning, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Only '90s kids, because that looks like porn in between the channels. You had to switch back and forth real quick, and you'd get a few seconds of clarity. Life before smartphones. Reading the shampoo bottle.
Okay, the ironic thing was with the scrambled porn. It's like I don't know if it was everywhere around here, but I remember at my house, it was funny. The channel that it came on was channel 69.
Yeah. Oh, you remember this?
Yeah,
Everybody drew that on everything. Nobody knew what it was.
I've also heard the conspiracy theory that it's a sigil, like a satanic sigil.
It could be.
It's like
Power
everyone
Rangers,
knew it, but
Blockbuster
nobody knew
Video.
where they learned it from.
This is what happened when 90 kids grow up and get adult money.
Yes.
You get Power Ranger motorcycle.
Hmm.
Multiplayer in the 90s. Yeah, I remember those days
I
actually,
remember, yeah.
but we did it like, okay, I'll take the keyboard and you take the mouse, and we played like Doom and Wolfenstein. So that was pretty fun. But man, it's
I
a
have played the ones where it's like player one has the WASD and then player two has the arrow keys.
Yeah.
And it's like I have this shift to actually do my stuff, and you have that shift.
And one of the big things that take over the culture in the 90s was video games. I mean, they were really booming since the 80s, but they took on a whole new...
90s was definitely a special time.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, let's look at our top list. Where we got Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Of
Yeah.
course, we had Zelda started in the 80s, but when you got to A Link to the Past in 91, it really was a whole new level. And then Zelda 64 and Ocarina of Time, it was something totally different.
Still to this day, Doom.
Yeah,
Doom is like the quintessential. It's like it is the most efficiently best made game because you can make it run on anything.
Yeah, I've actually got on this computer. I have several different versions of Doom,
People can
and
make it run on pregnancy tests. And shit
yeah,
like that.
and you can mod it to run on a Tamagotchi digital pet, like all kinds of neat stuff.
Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII was amazing. That was a total game changer.
Metal Gear
Chrono
Solid,
Trigger, Metal Gear Solid,
Pokemon,
Half-Life. People still play Counter-Strike to this day on the original Half-Life engine.
Yeah, Half-Life. Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
I also really loved. It won't be on here because that was a little. No, wasn't that much newer. But
Tomb
Chrono
Raider.
Cross.
Yeah, Chrono Cross. That was probably late 90s.
Yeah.
It might have been early 2000s.
Symphony of the Night. Probably still one of the best Castlevania games.
Oh yeah, I have that on PS4.
Civilization.
First Diablo, Donkey Kong Country,
Resident Evil.
Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. 3 was
Myst.
amazing. Yeah, Myst was awesome.
I think there is Silent Hill.
Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. I have that on this PC also.
Diablo.
That's when we got the first Pokemons. Chrono Cross is on here.
Okay, cool. Because Chrono Cross is probably one of my favorite games.
So here we hit Super Smash Brothers. That was that and GoldenEye. This one we really had main what do you call it, multiplayer coming on big. You keep going and keep going. It was a big time for the video
Final
games.
Fantasy 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah.
Because I see 8 right there. Those three were just like.
EverQuest. That was probably the first massive multiplayer online RPG.
Yeah.
I didn't know it started in '99. But you also had the Resident Evil games.
Looking at that.
Yeah, Killer Instinct. That was
Killer Instinct.
yeah. A lot of people wrote that off as a Mortal Kombat clone. Couldn't be further from the truth. Actually, Mortal Kombat copied a lot of the mechanics from Killer Instinct in later iterations of the game.
Gran
Turismo 1 and 2. Yeah,
Mhm.
total game changers. So lots of different
Off of the
stuff.
rappers.
Yeah, oh yeah, I remember that. One of the first rhythm-based games. That was a fun game. I used to hang out with this chick named Cassie and play Parappa the Rapper.
I was never good at that game.
Cassie was way better than I am. And so let's finish it up with television in the '90s.
Still funny. It's like I'm a great bassist, but I cannot play rhythm games to save my life.
Well, there was TV was still huge in the 90s, more than it is now, because everybody kind of tuned in for certain shows, and there was stuff like Twin Peaks was a phenomenon that really changed the way television was done, because so many shows before that, at the end of the show, everything just went back to normal, and actually Twin Peaks was kind of made in response to the the popular murder mysteries, particularly of the 80s, where there was they made basically commoditized violence, and you had a new victim every week, and nobody really cared who the victim was. The audience just wanted it wrapped up in a nice, neat package, who did it, so they could solve it and move on. And there was the whole, they made a meme about it now, about Jessica Lansbury, about wherever she goes, somebody gets murdered, like if Jessica, or no, Angela Lansbury, is Jessica, is she really the murderer? She the most prolific serial killer in history? Well, Twin Peaks was kind of the response to that, making you care about the victim, and the whole story was about who the victim was. And a lot of people focused on the fact that, oh well, he's showing there's this seedy underbelly beneath this town, but no, that's really not what it was. It was, the whole thing was the duality, and let's look at two sides of nature. There's good and evil in everybody, and kind of like our whole civilization is built on a balance of that, and that we've decided that good is more important, and so people feel like they have to hide that evil thing. So it's all kind of hiding, it's hiding somewhere, but without that evil, you can't have. Without the darkness, you can't have the light, and you can't have the beauty. And I think that was a big part of what he was trying to do with that show. And that really carried on, because it was popular at first, and then it faded off. It faded off once he was actually forced to, by the network, to reveal who the killer was. So when the audience found out who the killer was, they moved on, if we could get real deep into Twin Peaks, because I've watched this series a couple times, including The Return, and I feel like that it has a whole lot more to tell us than a lot of the people who break it down on YouTube and stuff give it credit for. And I'd like to get a Twin Peaks dive, if I can get Tim in here to do that with us sometime. It'd be really cool, because one, it was a self-aware TV show, which was one of the first things where you'd have characters who were aware that they were in a TV show. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but the Donna character, there's a point in the television show where she becomes aware that she's a character in a television show. So she starts wearing big black glasses and smoking cigarettes and acting like Audrey Hepburn, and several of the characters in the show kind of figure it out. So it's a neat perspective, and adds a whole other level to it. But and then there's a level beyond that, but we'll get into that in a longer show. But you had NYPD Blue was huge, did 12 seasons. Everybody, that was the first ass on television. The first nudity on network television was, I can't remember this guy's name, but his ass on network television was the first time they showed nudity.
Stuff that I watched, definitely, I liked Roswell as a kid.
Roswell was good. Do you remember
Charmed,
the awful sci-fi shows? But there were not really many like sci-fi shows. So if you watch the shows on the Sci-Fi Channel, you had movies and series like The Guyver. Like, these were god awful, but that was all he had.
Guyver is awesome.
It was awful, but it was all he had.
I watched the Guyver films not long ago, and it has David Hayter in it, which is
Solid Snake.
Solid Snake. Okay, I see Angel, but I was like, okay, I have to say,
Angel and Charmed were really popular.
But I was like, there we go, Buffy.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, yep.
It's
Party
like
of Five.
Definitely for, Party of Five.
I didn't watch it, but it was big.
Yeah.
90210, stuff like that.
It's like, I was big into Buffy way back then.
And then you had My So-Called Life, which was like 90210 for the grunge crowd. It was like, okay, well, this is popular, so we need to make something like this for the kids who are a little less on the out. And you had even
if you want sci-fi shows that were cool, Sliders.
Sliders was cool. And when I'm thinking of My So-Called Life, I'm reminded of the Darlene character in Roseanne. It was like, okay, Roseanne was a really cool one too, and she started in the late '80s, but it was the '90s when she was at her peak, and that was a big driving force of culture in the '90s, because Roseanne was I think she had the first gay kiss on her show, or the first gay wedding or something. Maybe Ellen DeGeneres was the first, but I remember Roseanne was the first one talking about it, and she had her characters. They were like one of the first real families, like Dan probably had a drinking problem, and Roseanne was. They never could really get ahead of anything. They were always getting, screwed over by life, but they all stuck together, and they had a bunch of weird kids that, like, their oldest was, like, getting married and moving into the trailer park as soon as she turned 18. The other one's, like, you know, smoking pot and listening to L7 and, kind of more edgy stuff. And then the other one's just a total weirdo. They kind of didn't fit that mold of even somebody like a family like a Home Improvement. Where those were like your traditional American family, but it was not necessarily a real traditional American family. It was like your traditional entertainment American family. Whereas Roseanne kind of looked at more like a real family of, almost dysfunctional family, but they somehow still held it together. And that's how most real families were. So people really related to that. And Roseanne also hit a lot of situations that other people felt, like losing your job, the local government screwing you over, your factory being owned by some shitty guy who cares more about how many plastic widgets than he can make, and he'd rather close the factory than lose a few dollars because he has to pay his people a few dollars more. This kind of stuff that a lot of people were going through, because in the 90s you had a lot of that manufacturing really going overseas, or it had gone overseas starting in like the 70s and 80s, but it was really starting to hit home. You had Walmart moving in and pushing a lot of smaller stores out of business, and so a lot of these places
like
that people
in the 90s.
Yeah, well, gosh,
up.
I remember Elizabethton when Walmart opened when I was a kid in the I think it was probably 87, 88, something like that. They opened the original Walmart, and I was so excited about it. And like there were things that I could get at Walmart that I couldn't get anywhere else. There were things in Elizabethton that you just weren't able to get, and it was a good thing in a lot of ways, but in a lot of other ways, it had collateral effect of the smaller stores that were selling these things. They don't buy them. Like if you're an electronics store in Elizabethton in the 80s, you might buy a couple hundred TVs for a year, and you're not buying them in bulk to where you can get them. You're probably having to sell them for $300, where Walmart is buying them in enough bulk that they can sell them for $200 and still make money. And a lot of the things then you also had, and I'm just use Walmart as an example just because they're probably the largest, but you had lots of international chain stores come into town, and basically they can even take a loss for a little while because they have the backing of huge money behind them, so they can take a loss until they put the local competition out of business, and then they're the only game in town. But you saw a lot of this reflected in a show like Roseanne, where they really got into not just, oh look, the Winslows are going to Disneyland, and of course that was probably, I think Roseanne's family did go to Disneyland too, because they were on ABC, and you pretty much had to, if you're on an ABC show, go to Disneyland. I remember the TGIF shows.
Dinosaurs. Nope.
The dinosaurs, yes, that was a good one, and you don't hear that one talked about anymore, and I've forgotten all about it, to be honest.
Not the mama.
Yeah, dinosaurs, that was a huge one. Like, you saw the Not the Mama thing everywhere. Xena and Hercules, The Legendary Journey.
La Femme Nikita.
Yeah, I forgot about La Femme Nikita. Crime movies and television. We had Law and Order was, of course, huge.
Doug.
Yeah, Doug. I forgot about Doug.
A lot of the 90s cartoons were great.
Judge Joe Brown. I remember we had Judge Joe Brown and Maury Povich. That was the big day, the heyday of Maury Povich and Jerry Springer.
Stargate.
Oh yeah, Stargate, the movie and the show.
Yeah, it's like Farscape. Hell yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of good stuff, man. It's
Stargate's just great, and I keep forgetting that it started in the 90s. It's as many times as I've seen that through.
Third Rock from the Sun. That was a big one at the time.
Never watched it.
Erie, Indiana was like Twin Peaks for kids.
Yeah,
it was
that
really
was a good
good. I was into that big time. And then you had like your animation shows, Gargoyles, X-Men on Disney and stuff that were really good. Like that's back when
97 Spider-Man was great.
And back then, like the X-Men, they actually just remade the comic books
Mhm.
as an animated series, and this was when I was into that kind of stuff. Uh, they made the X-Men, and it was like, this is the X-Men. If you like the X-Men, this is when you can watch it. This is when you can read it.
Mhm.
Not, oh well, we've got to make, like, the X-Men did really well, but we've really got to draw in like the single, the urban, you know, urban gay women vote, or to this movie. And I really feel like the superhero movies, they've just been made for the biggest possible
Mhm.
audiences,
But that
and
was
they've
the thing, especially about '90s X-Men. It's like that was the thing. It's like everyone that was different, you fit in.
yeah, and now they made it for everybody, and that's the whole thing about it. Is like,
Mhm.
the whole thing about X-Men was you felt like you could identify with these
And they
characters
wanted to
because you were
change
different.
the name to what was it they wanted to change that people were like, cause it has the word men in it.
Oh, X people, I don't
No, they wanted to
know.
change it to I think they wanted to even call it the mutants, which I was
Mm,
like, the mutants. It's like that was the slur
yeah,
that the people that hated them called them. That wasn't. They chose the X-Men because that's what. That was something like empowering for them.
yeah.
And then it's just like they wanted to call them the. It was something along the mutants, or it was another one of the slurs that they called the people who had the abilities. I was like, that was like whenever I heard them, I'm like, that's the worst thing to call them
Yeah.
because that's like calling a racial slur to somebody.
Well, I think that was it, because we had, if you remember, one of the things in the '90s was you had, and it was mentioned in a movie, Gran Torino, in the 2010s with Clint Eastwood. You had the scene where he goes into the barbershop, and all the men are making racially insensitive jokes to one another, and they're just laughing it off. And we won't say them because we'll probably get us banned off of YouTube. But they're not actually racist people. It was the way men talked to one another, and they laughed about their differences because they knew they were only superficial, right? They knew that it was funny that their buddy, Jim Bob, was a black guy, so they might make a joke about him stealing a stereo because it's a, cultural stereotype that he would do that. But they all know that Jim's not actually stealing a stereo, and they don't actually mean anything by it. They're just ribbing one another and busting each other's balls. And a lot of this kind of talk really was people were becoming comfortable in real life talking that way around one another in the 90s and the 2000s, and kind of recognizing that we're different but we're all part of the same culture, and that ultimately we're all human beings, and the things that are similar about us are much more than the things that are different about us. But the things that are different about us are really not a big deal, and we can actually have fun with them and laugh about them, and
Mm-hmm.
and they can make us a stronger culture. But
Even though that movie, most people I guess would find it very insensitive and want to cancel it if they watched it today. But it was still like the arcing theme of it, because like Clint Eastwood's character arc,
yeah.
the arc that he had from the beginning of the film to the end of the film.
Like, yeah, he was a racist bastard in a lot of ways, but it's like, um, at the same time, he recognized that the things that he was being an asshole about, and changed them.
Mm-hmm.
And
He grew as a character, and it's like after losing his wife, he had no one else, and then he became part of the family, which I forget their.
the
It's been
Hmong people.
yeah.
Yeah, you could. I mean, and you could say that was really a metaphor for the country too, because we did as a country go through a period of where more people were racist than not, and where racism really defined a lot of our society. But as we've gone on and grown together, and a lot of the culture that came out, particularly in the '70s, '80s, and '90s, really drew us closer together. But I think that the powers that be don't like that about it, and I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of these icons from the '90s are really not discussed or popular anymore, is because they were like too close. They hit that nail right on the head, and it identified a time where we were reaching the point that was supposed to be victory, but like, it's almost like the progressive left in their attempt at cultural dominance is not enough to make a liberal culture where everybody can participate in. It's like, no, this is the way, and we're going to show people the way, and now this is where we want to be. We want to push people to. We can't have everybody getting along and agreeing that we may have differences,
It's
but
like that's bad for business.
yeah, exactly. We need to redivide
If
everybody.
everybody's working together, that means if we piss them off, the ones in power, if we piss them off, they're uniting themselves. They'll all work together to,
Yeah.
change things.
And if you look in the 90s, we at that point we still had a cultural core of these things are good and these are things that we want for society and these things we don't. That's been destroyed. So I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of the 90s stuff really can't happen is like when I was watching Money Train today, like I was watching, they were like, this was in I don't forget what city, but maybe it was a large metro area, New York, Philadelphia, the Bronx, something like this, DC maybe, but it was all about these guys who were like cops on the train and they were like stopping people from robbing people in the subway. It's like nobody even cares if anybody gets robbed in the subway now. Like and like you couldn't show that movie to people now and they would even care. Like nobody wants to watch a movie where the cop's the good guy anymore. I mean, back and if you start off like that movie Money Train in the beginning of it, they're chasing a guy to catch him for thieves and for stealing from him, and then like the guys that protect the train for the city just gun him down. So they're addressing the idea of like, okay, we shouldn't just gun people down for shooting stuff. This is a kid; he should go to jail and learn not to steal things, but it doesn't mean he deserves to die. And but it was kind of this whole thing where we like, yes, we should have law and order, and yes, we should have cops that protect us, but we also should be reasonable about it. And there was a lot of stuff where
you also shouldn't rely on that as your entire protection source.
Yeah,
you're responsible for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing that we've come to recognize that more. But I think the main thing was we all kind of agreed that this is where we wanted to be as a society, and that you were able to have that kind of a movie with that kind of protagonist. But I really don't think you could have it nowadays. Mm-hmm. We tried to find Lost Cove many times, got close. Not much was left from when I saw near it says Armageddon Hour. Well, we're going to talk about Lost Cove right now, and it's kind of a little bit of one of those. We're talking about time passing us by and how time marches on, and it sure did for the Lost Cove. This is from Atlas Obscura, and it's marched on for this website. This is from 2009. Somebody put this up here. Well, they got some good pictures, and it's not as in good a shape. I went up there in probably 2015 and got some pictures up inside this building, and it was dilapidated. Then it was still standing, but barely. And that's one of the two remaining structures back in 2009. And there's a couple of old trucks in there if you go in. Now, the Lost Cove it's technically in Unicoi County. You get there, you got to kind of walk up in the mountains and you hike a good ways. And I could see how you would get lost there, and it would be really easy. It's just it's on the Nolechucky River in the Poplar Gorge between Tennessee and North Carolina. And for the longest time, it was contested territory. They didn't know really if it was on the North Carolina side or the Tennessee side. And in the early 1900s, a lot of moonshiners went up there. And when one was brought to jail on accusations of illegal brewing, the judge dismissed the cage as outside his jurisdiction. And so this caused more moonshiners to come up there and start moonshining. Well, then the lumber industry and the railroad came in, and there was a wagon road in 1912, and the town got pretty prosperous. And then they had a pretty good logging operation going on too, and had a school and probably about 100 people living there. Well, they started kind of running down on the good timber up there, and then the railroad stopped going up there because they were getting coal. And eventually, 1957, the last town was left. So only about 50 years did this place stay. And here's pull up this map for you. We can, get a little bit closer here. And we're kind of right here off of Flag Pond. If you go up 26, it's in Irwin here. And before you get to Flag Pond. But it's up in the mountains. It's you can find maps. It's not that hard to find here, and we'll have to go up there with you one time, brother, if you want to have a hike out there, see what's still there. Again, there was a part of the schoolhouse and that house in the picture there that we looked at a minute ago that was still there when I went, but again, that was almost 10 years ago. So the railroad left, the town dried up, and There's a cemetery, a few trucks, not much left of it at all. There's another picture of one of the houses there. And we had a very cold and windy lunch inside this house, me and my kids and my two brothers and my wife when we went. Probably went down, I don't know, I can't remember if we went in the late fall or early spring, but it was frigid cold and windy. And there's a scene of the mountains. Here's that house again where we had our cold lunch. That's still standing, or it was when I went up there. That's near one of the trucks that was there. And then that's really all that's left of it.
You see a picture of the truck, and you're like, "No, I'm gonna restore sometime." It's like
Yeah.
ask someone about a vehicle. It's like it'll be looking like that. No, I'm gonna restore next week.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're not.
They always have a plan to restore, and they never do. But yeah, man, if you're interested in more, it'd be pretty fun to do just like we did the Iron Mountain Hour shooting club. If anybody's up to doing the hike, let us know. We might do that. It is a pretty intensive hike, so you're probably going to spend a whole day going there, checking it out, and hiking out. I mean, at least 8 to 10 hours doing, probably 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours in, 2.5, 3 hours out. If you want to have a couple hours to look at it, that's based on my memory. It might not have been that long, but that's how long it feels. Aaron, your ancestry DNA linked you to the North Carolina Settlers group. Okay. Well, you're from McCoy blood, ain't you? Or Hatfield, you're from McCoy blood. Yeah, Aaron, go over, everybody check out Armageddon Hour podcast. Aaron's been doing some stuff on bug out bags and survival training. Good stuff for you if you weren't a Boy Scout, or if you were and you need a brush up. A lot of good stuff you can learn from him. He's looking at how to make your pack to have everything you need in it. Also, we were talking about ham radios. There's Baofeng radios. You've heard of those, right? You can actually set these things up. You can get a pair of them for $46 right now. Shoot, I wish I had planned on sharing the link with you. But those Baofeng radios, they can be set to ham length. You can program them digitally to go to all different kinds of frequencies and listen in on different stuff and be able to broadcast on different frequencies. And you can do like burst transmissions where you can change your frequency and change your, so you'll be harder to triangulate and all that good stuff. But Baofeng radios, if you don't know about those, you can find books on. There's a great one by NC Scout on how to use that and set it up and to use it to communicate in, say, the grid went down or something like that. But yeah, man, that's it for tonight. I think we're going to get out of here. I got an early morning, so I was going to try to be done by 11, but we were only off by 20 minutes. That's not too bad, really, when you're talking about one of the most influential decades of my childhood, for sure. It was really probably my most formative years, as I was 8 years old in 1990, so, turned 18 in 2000, so I'm definitely a product of the 90s culture, and it's just a shame not to see it as represented as you see other decades nowadays. Maybe we should do something about that. Maybe we need to make a 90s themed program or short movie with kind of the way that a lot of people did with these 80s things, like something like Stranger Things, where they took a lot of the different cultural forces of the 90s and make a story around it based on everything that we all identify from them. So anyway, if you'd be down to do a Lost Cove trip, everybody email the ironmountaingmail.com, ironmountainhour@gmail.com, or you can comment on the Twitter or YouTube page and let us know if that's something you'd want to do. Iron Mountain or Aaron Armageddon is ready to go. So y'all hit us up and let us know, and we will see you on Thursday when Aaron and I are going to get into the news and current events roundup. So be sure and like the video on X, on YouTube, and on Rumble. Share it around on all those different platforms and watch it on other ones than you normally do. That way you can get those numbers pumping for us, and we can pick up the audience, especially here in the Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia area. So we appreciate you joining us, and again, we will see you on Thursday. Dustin, you got anything you want to leave us with?
Turtle power.
Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power. How did we not talk about Ninja Turtles? But it's too late.
I thought about I was thinking about that. I'm like, man.
That was a huge one for me. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.